Hello everyone, welcome to the Red Channel. Today's video topic is the BMW R1300 RT. That's right, after the R1300 GS, which revolutionized the way we think about a GS, and the R1300 GS Adventure, which is still sparking debate, it's now time for the third flagship of BMW's Boxer series, the RT. This is a very important motorcycle for BMW, especially because in the super tourer segment, if we can call it that, it really has very few competitors. Its only real competitor within the brand is the K1600, but in this segment, there really aren't any other models from other brands at the moment. So it's a bike that works very much under the radar. It makes less noise than the GS models, but it really sells in large numbers, and BMW devotes a lot of attention to it. Like all its cousins with the 1300 engine, the R1300 RT has also undergone a complete redesign. I'll explain in detail what's changed, and then we'll take it out for a test ride. With this model, the BMW 1300 Boxer family is truly complete. After the R1300 GS and its inevitable adventure variant, the naked R1300R and the sport touring R1300 RS followed in quick succession. Now, completing the circle, comes the R1300 RT, perhaps the most eagerly awaited of the latecomers. That's because this model has many fans, and among tourers, it's the undisputed benchmark. As with its siblings, in Munich they've decided to start from scratch, completely overhauling the look of their super tourer and packing it with technology. But not without a few constants, such as the low seat, for example. Since in the best case the RT sets the seat height at just 78 centimeters from the ground. The seat, just like on the GS Adventure, is adjustable both in height and tilt, and can go from 760 mm in the lowest position up to 860. The price, I'll tell you right away, starts at 24,300 euros, but it can skyrocket in no time. The bike you see in this test, equipped with all the packages including adjustable deflectors and variable suspension, shoots up to 31,300 euros.
What doesn't change though is still here at the heart. The 1301cc two-cylinder Boxer engine with shift cam timing capable of 145 horsepower and 149 Newton meters of torque. An engine that even in this configuration also on the RT is available both with a manual gearbox and with the automated ACER gearbox. I'd like to remind you that this automated gearbox also has an automatic function, but it can still be used manually with a classic foot pedal, because this bike keeps the pedal. A very minor change is on the final drive ratio, which is just a bit longer compared to the one used on the GS. This is to ensure that this bike, which is designed for touring, is even more relaxed.
In terms of electronics, there isn't much difference compared to the GS models we already know, because obviously the technical foundation is the same. There are three standard riding modes available: Rain, Road and Eco, with Dynamic and Dynamic Pro offered as optional extras. The electronics here are still top-notch, because if you want, you can equip both the front and rear radar, which means you get active cruise control, blind spot monitoring, brake assist, and also a warning for vehicles approaching from behind. In short, a truly comprehensive suite of electronics as befits a real flagship like the R1300 RT. One of the so-called issues identified with the old R1250 RT was that, according to BMW technicians, evidently also according to customers, the bike seemed much larger and bulkier than it actually was. The design of the new R1300 RT follows the trend of all the new 1300s, so it's definitely a bold, groundbreaking design. BMW has worked extensively to give the RT a sportier, more aggressive look without neglecting protection. The new feature is these two deflectors that can be adjusted manually, either closed or open, to improve the rider's aerodynamic protection. What does that mean? The fairing has been designed to be a bit more compact, but if you want, you can restore a very high level of protection by raising these two deflectors. Other changes have definitely been made to the windshield and the front end, where the headlights are now more recessed into the fairing. In short, the bike has been completely redesigned to give it a slightly more dynamic look. And not only that, the riding position has also been changed. I'm really curious now to see if this bike actually rides in a more active way than before.
Okay, before we get started with the new RT, let's take a look at what you see when you get on the new DMV Tourer. First of all, the riding position, I'll tell you right away, has changed quite a bit. The seat is higher, you feel more in control, it's a more active position. Not less comfortable, but definitely more active, that's for sure. Let's turn it on. The screen, well, the display is really huge. It's over 10 inches. I'd like to point out the adjustable levers, which can be set very easily with 3 clicks using these little levers, both for the clutch when it's present, which it isn't now because we're using the ASAN for the brake. This is the version with the automated gearbox, so the controls are the ones we're already familiar with. Here is the button to activate or deactivate the automatic function of the automated gearbox. On the right, there's the classic button to change the riding modes, which are Rain, Road Dynamic, and Dynamic Pro, the most dynamic modes. And inside the menu with the hamburger icon, you can manage the adaptive cruise control, the seat and grip heating, of course, and also the windscreen. The interesting thing is that no matter which function you're in, whether it's the windscreen or the windshield, if you press and hold the hamburger button, it activates directly. So it's a shortcut to activate the electric windshield function. By pressing the menu down, instead you get to the, let's say, the menus for defining and setting up the bike. The most interesting one is definitely the settings menu. If you want to adjust the suspension setup, you go to Assist, Suspension. And this is interesting because it tells you that you can change the hydraulic configuration in this ride mode, unlike other BMWs where it only lets you define the 2 mappings, road and dynamic share. You can specifically set both mappings. In this case, it tells you that in this configuration, for example, when you're in dynamic mode, you're going to modify the hydraulics. And this is something you can also do while the bike is moving. Let me remind you that RT has this new feature with the suspension, let's say adaptive, which when you switch to dynamic mode, preloads both the front and rear, but also raises the rear to slightly change the rake and give the bike even more agility. The stereo system is, let's say, very interesting. They've improved the usability of the radio system. Here we are. Yes, this is how you turn it on. I would say that in terms of sound quality, we're really at a high level. More or less, that's everything you can see. Let me show you the range of movement the windshield is capable of. Let's go back up to the main menu. If I press and hold the button, I go straight to the windscreen. And this is the full range of movement of the windshield. I'd say it's quite substantial. Up here at the top, it's fairly tapered. Then we'll see when we use it if the protection has actually improved or not. More or less, that's everything you can see on board the new RT. The mirrors are new, redesigned. You can see these little fins here to protect your forearms. And last but not least, the small compartment with a small iPhone inside, but even the large one fits, which is ventilated to cool the phone while it's charging. That's pretty much everything you can see. Let's start it up and go. Small addition about the dashboard. The hamburger button is programmable. You can see that right now it says old here on the windscreen. So by holding it down, as I said, from any function you can access whatever feature you want through the shortcut. If I want it to be CC instead, for example, I just hold down the button on the right for a long time and you can see that the whole button moves to CC. Now I go to windscreen and it goes back there. So this is convenient because we can program the function we use most often without having to go into the menu. By holding it down for a long time, now, as I mentioned before, if I'm inside anything and I hold down the hamburger button for a long time, I can directly access the function I've assigned to it as a shortcut. TS is a formatting. Interesting.
Well, the day with the R1300T is coming to an end. Actually, we still have half a day of testing left to return the bikes to BMW, but today, well, almost 200 kilometers of testing, very smooth riding. And well, what has emerged is a picture of the bike that I think is interesting. I'll be pretty quick and get straight to the point because I think it's a bit pointless to talk about the engine and the whole transmission since we've already discussed them several times during all the tests of the R1300GS and the R1300GS Adventure. In the end, the powertrain, as the experts say, is the same. There is a difference in the gearing compared to the R1300GS. Here, it's just a bit longer and loses about 100 RPM at 130 kilometers per hour, we're around 4,250 revolutions per minute to allow the bike to be even more relaxed. All this does not take away from the RT the brilliance given by the 1300 engine, which once again proves to be an outstanding engine in terms of ride flexibility and throttle management, because at this point BMW only makes news if they get the throttle response wrong, not if they get it right. So all that aspect of engine braking management and throttle reopening, whether in the road dynamic or dynamic pro riding modes, is, in my opinion, absolutely spot on. This is the version with the ASA, so with the automated gearbox, which, as you know, also functions as a fully automatic transmission. In my opinion, it fits here perfectly, like cheese on macaroni, because on a bike like this, when you're completely relaxed and just cruising, the automatic function can only be useful. In my opinion, it works well because I believe BMW has also slightly revised the operating logic, especially for the dynamic mapping. I find that it holds the gear a bit less when you're riding in a relaxed way compared to the 1300 GS, for example. So it shifts up more quickly when you're not asking for torque, because it understands that you're riding more relaxed than before. Previously, it tended to hold the gear longer more than before, meaning more than the 1300 GS, because on the 1300 GS it tended to hold the gear a bit too much. The kickdown logic works well here, so I think it's an ASA that in this configuration, let's call it the RT configuration, I definitely find more refined. That's basically what I noted about the engine. Both mappings are valid. The dynamic one is obviously a bit more subdued compared to a 1300 GS because there's a bit more weight to move, but the bike still remains super dynamic. But the most interesting part obviously comes from the chassis and also the riding position, because when I sit on the saddle seat, it's currently in the standard position. You can easily touch the ground with your feet. Right now, the suspension is off, meaning the engine is off, so the bike stays a bit stiff. But then when you turn on the dashboard, the bike tends to soften up. This bike doesn't have a lowering device, but you can still easily touch the ground with both feet. It's a chassis that does justice to the RT's dynamism. After all, the RT has always been a surprisingly agile bike to ride, even though it looks big. And in this case, the approach they've taken is somewhat similar to what they did with the 1300 GS. Everything is a bit more compact. The area where you place your feet is extremely slim. And the whole front part, the look of the RT has become a bit more streamlined. Now it's a little more compact, but the wind protection hasn't been compromised. I'm coming back to the riding position because, in my opinion, it's one of the most important aspects. The handlebar has changed a bit. It's a little wider and the seat position is a bit higher. You feel a bit more in control, sitting with your arms a bit more open. The handling has definitely improved because with the old RT, which was certainly a perfect bike for long distance travel and for my height, absolutely ideal if you were taller, you always tended to feel a bit cramped. On the new 1300, however, the riding position is a step forward, in my opinion, both in terms of control over the bike and riding pleasure, but also in terms of reducing fatigue over long distances. I should point out that there's excellent wind protection. The upper part of the windshield has a slight magnifying effect. I always keep it more or less at this height, roughly halfway between fully up and fully down. The work BMW has done to prevent the backdraft when the windshield is fully raised, I have to say, is effective because we rode on the highway at fairly high speeds. What they did here, they created an air tunnel between the screen and the fairing that eliminates this push from behind, and as a result, you really feel much more neutral on the seat. They've also redesigned the mirrors with these little fins, these deflectors, to divert the air away from your forearms. While riding, I have to say that I could still feel some air on the upper part of my forearms. A good thing about the RT, this cover that removes all the heat coming from the cylinders, channels it and directs it elsewhere, keeping your legs a bit cooler as well. Even though today, let's say, we never went above 23 or 24 degrees, so these aren't really critical days in terms of heat, I still ended up feeling a bit of warmth on my feet. One last note, the deflectors do actually block the air here. It's not something entirely new. They're not adaptive deflectors like the ones mounted on the Guzzi Mandello. You have to raise them by hand. You can lift them whenever you want at any speed, and they divert the air away from the lower part of your torso here. They work a bit the opposite way compared to the ones that maybe those who have had the K1600 will remember. Those were up here in front and you would open them to let more air in. because the K1600 offers so much protection that in the end you actually need to let more air in. So in my opinion, the riding position is definitely a success. As for the passenger, obviously when we do press test, we can't ride for long with the passenger, so we'll come back to this point later. I have to say though, the handles are well made. There's a rubber section here. I tried sitting in the back and it offers a lot of grip. So you're very, very comfortable. And I'll finish with the panniers, which in this case are the Vario ones, but they're not the standard ones. The standard ones are this size. So they offer 27 liters of capacity. These are the Vario cases. So with the knob here, you can expand them and reach up to 33 liters. They're good. And they're also a bit slower to expand compared to the old Vario cases that had the big handle. But the good thing is that you can also set them to intermediate positions if you don't need the full width. It's a bit odd that the standard RT comes with 27-liter cases, which are smaller than those offered on the RS. But in any case, in this instance, they're symmetrical. Cycling dynamics, which is the last thing I left off with. In my opinion, there are both highlights and drawbacks when it comes to the cycling dynamics. The highlights are definitely the absolute maneuverability of the bike. The bike handles really well, it's super fast, and when you want to push it, it really can go fast. The suspension part works well in my opinion. I also found good control even in dynamic mode, and what's interesting is that you can adjust the hydraulic damping even while riding, which you can't do on other BMWs. The change in setup between road and dynamic, you need to pay a bit of attention to it to realize that the bike actually becomes a bit sharper at the front when you use dynamic. It moves less on the suspension, but it's also faster because, as I explained earlier, dynamic stiffens the whole bike, but also raises the rear to reduce the trail a bit and give the bike quicker handling. So far, so good. The downsides, let's say, come a bit from the braking system, which still hasn't completely satisfied me. There's definitely enough power, but the front brake lever tends to feel a bit stiff. However, the combined braking system, which transfers some of the braking force to the front wheel when you use the pedal, or at least a portion of the braking to the front axle on this bike, it's really noticeable, especially in road mode, because the riding modes are different. So the integrated braking works differently depending on whether you're in road mode or dynamic mode. But in my opinion, it's too much. Since I use the rear brake a lot on the road to control my line, I end up with too much braking force on the front when I just slightly touch the rear brake. Okay, in road mode I could maybe accept it, but in dynamic I definitely want less of it. However, as I've already mentioned, if you've been following me, if you've seen the video about the GS Adventure, this feature actually comes in handy when you're riding two up with a full load. But I have to say that in the end, on the GS, this weight transfer from the rear to the front didn't really bother me that much, and on the GS Adventure even less so. But on this bike is very noticeable. It's clear that the tuning BMW chose for the RT is even more touring oriented, and you really feel it a bit of that stand-up effect, especially in road mode, I repeat, because the bike transfers the loads more, and as a result the rear ABS tends to kick in a bit more often. In short, it's a setup that, in my opinion, still doesn't quite convince me, and I want to try it again. I repeat, fully loaded with a passenger, because that's when you really understand the usefulness of this system. But at this point, I have to say, I would also like it to be switchable off, or at least pair with just one riding mode, so that you can choose not to have it, or at least have it be less intrusive. Again, in road mode, it could be acceptable, but in dynamic, in my opinion, it's a bit too much. The instrumentation is really top-notch in terms of readability. By the way, there's also split screen, so you can have additional information on the sides. During today's ride, we average 5.9 liters per 100 kilometers, which is really an interesting consumption rate, considering the bike's performance and engine displacement. So the RT confirms itself for what it is, with all its qualities. It's a bike that can be a valid alternative to the GS Adventure, especially for those who don't have the build to handle a GS Adventure. This bike is definitely easier to handle than its maxi enduro sister. It offers sumptuous wind protection, and it has a range of technological features that make it really interesting. The radar works very well. I tried the ACC on the highway. There were a few missed lock-ons, but it's something, in short, anyone who uses cars with adaptive cruise control knows that this isn't unusual. Even among cars, and with, let's say, the automated gearbox, I think it really reaches full maturity. On the cycling side, here's the good part, the new front telelever, the Evo, the one with the thicker fork and the different stanchion mounting system, definitely transmits what happens under the front wheel much, much better. So it's a bike that doesn't want to be sportier. It remains an RT through and through. But certainly between the riding position, the engine, which as we know has a great punch, especially from 3,000 to 6,000 revolutions per minute, it's really strong, and an agility that I think has improved even further. It manages to be definitely more dynamic. The distribution of the braking system definitely still needs some fine tuning, as I wasn't completely satisfied with it, and also the gear shift with the ASA, because when downshifting it tends to have a bit of a step which I don't remember being present on the other ASAs. That's pretty much everything from my side. I have to say the RT is definitely an interesting bike. It's interesting that usually after the GS, the RT was always the first to receive new features, but now it has arrived at the same time alongside the RS and the R. So basically, the new 1,300 updates have now been introduced across the entire range. But in any case, when it comes to super touring bikes, this one has very little competition. Its only real competitor is actually in-house, the K1600, but that's a completely different philosophy here. There's definitely more riding pleasure. That's everything I noted down about the R1300 RT. If you have any questions for me, I'm definitely here to answer them. And if you have questions about the Boxer, about ASA, or anything else you want to know, I'll be waiting for you in the comments below. I'd say that's all from Munich. See you in the next video.